shaken from its place at the fury of the Lord of armies in the day of burning anger. And it'll be that like hunted gazelle, or like the sheep, that no one will gather them. Each one of them will turn to his own people, and each one will flee to his own land. Anyone who's found will be thrust through, and anyone who is captured will fall by the sword. The little ones will be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be plundered, their wives raped. Wow, this is terrible. Behold, I'm going to stir up the Medes against them who will not value silver or take pleasure in gold, and their bow will mow down the young men. They will not even have compassion on the fruit of their womb, nor will their eye pity children. In Babylon, the beauty of kingdoms, the glory of the Chaldeans' pride, will be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It will never be inhabited or lived in from generation to generation, nor will the Arab pitch his tent there, nor will shepherds allow their flocks to lie down there. But the desert creatures will lie down there, and their houses will be full of owls. Ostriches will live there, and shaggy goats will frolic there. Hyenas will howl in their fortified towers, and jackals in their luxurious palaces. Her fateful time will also soon come, and her days will not be prolonged. All right, so what we have here is a statement of judgment, on, sorry, I'm marking something here real quick.
I don't know what to do with that.
All right, just making sure I got everyone. Yeah, sorry. When your name's not on the list, did you remove your name? You're like, I don't know if I want to be associated with that group. Shady group. A month ago he was on the list, now he's not, and I'm not sure which one of you pushed him over the top. I'm not sure. Yeah. It's good. All right, so what we have here is a statement about the rise of Babylon and its fall, and the prediction of its fall coming at the hands of the Medes. And the Medo-Persian Empire will be the one that defeats them. You might remember that Darius the Mede defeats the city of Babylon. He does so almost without effort, because he blocks off the river that ran right through the middle of downtown, and they walked underneath the wall of the city and right into the city. Yeah. So pretty smart military. They blocked off the river and just went, now there's no water flowing through there. So now there's a judgment on nations here, and this introduces us to two of the main nations that will show up in these predictions. One is the Babylonians, and two, the Medo-Persians. And so the nations that are listed in Isaiah 13 through 39 are the following: Egypt, Jacob, Israel, Aram, known as Damascus, Edom, the Philistines, Philistia, Moab, Arabia, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Tyre and Sidon. So these are all the nations that are mentioned. And what we're going to find from these nations is that they will rise and fall. And their rise and fall is at the sovereign will of God. That they think, like Nebuchadnezzar does. Kim and I have been reading through the book of Daniel. And there's Daniel 4, right? Isn't it 4? Maybe it's 3. Where Nebuchadnezzar walks out and says, I think it's 3. Walks out and says, look at the kingdom I built. And God's like, you should spend some time in the pasture. And so off he goes. He gets bovinism, which is a real condition, by the way, of people who think they're a farm animal and eat grass out of the field. It's a mental condition, yeah. And in Nebuchadnezzar, in the Nabonidus cylinder, Nebuchadnezzar attributes this to his enemy. I've actually seen the cylinder. I couldn't read it because I don't read cuneiform, but the cylinder where this accusation is made, it's in the Louvre in Paris. So if you go to the Louvre, leave yourself 4 or 5 days and guard your belongings. Pickpockets are notorious in the Louvre. So control your wallet because they will take it. And so, but in the Louvre, there's a whole section of Neo-Babylonian. This isn't Babylonian, it's Neo-Babylonian, just for the record. Babylonians go back to Kodaham-Merabi in 2100 BC, the time of Abraham. This is a Neo-Babylonian, Neo-Chaldean kingdom. And Nebuchadnezzar likes the old one, though, because he makes reference to the Tower of Babel in his Nabonidus, in one of the cylinders. That one's not the cylinder of Nabonidus. I don't remember what that one was. But anyway, there's a cylinder that makes reference to the Tower of Babel and God confusing the languages and scattering the people. Do you know that? There's a record from Babylon in cuneiform about the Tower of Babel. And in there's also a flood narrative in the Babylonian records, but in there, Nebuchadnezzar does have this enemy of his that he attributes this bovinism, which I find interesting. He accuses his opponent of losing his mind, let himself, not cutting his hair or anything, and wandering with wild beasts, is that the guy just loses it, right? We see this also in another place in the Bible. Remember the man who was living in the catacombs, totally out of control, that kind of thing? He's also similar, only his was demon possession, but similar type attributes, right? He's hanging out in the wild. No one could tame him. They try to shackle him, all those kinds of things. So this is not, I know this seems weird for Nebuchadnezzar, but this isn't that weird, actually. It occurs. But he gets really arrogant, like, look at the kingdom I've built. And God's like, go spend some time with the sheep and some goats and some cows, and we'll talk later. We'll talk later. It says for 7 seasons, and I don't know what the 7 seasons are. I need to go look that up. I assume this is seasons of the calendar year, like fall, winter, spring, but it could be 7 years. But I bet it's 7 seasons, almost 2 years. Yeah, yep, when?
The gates in that museum, on the roof, were those the gates that Daniel saw?
The gates.
Don't they have the walls and the gates of Babylon?
They do have the gates of Babylon there. I don't know if they come from Daniel's day, but yeah, they could be older than that. I don't know if they're the original. So there's an original Babylonian city that's not Nebuchadnezzar's city. He builds his city up the river a little bit. So I don't know, but those gates may be Nebuchadnezzar. I don't know. I need to look and see. Surely I would have seen them. But yeah, I had kids with me, so it does slow down your viewing. Turns out reading the labels on stuff is not a 10-year-old fan favorite. Did y'all know that? So, yeah, had to move on. So, but yeah, that sounds familiar to me, but I'm not sure. Austin was just obsessed with the cuneiform cylinders. They're little cylinders about like this, shaped like, not like an egg. They have like a barrel, like a tiny barrel. And they have cuneiform all over them. And you can, in the Louvre, there's magnifying glasses and stuff, and you can look down in them, and then you can rotate some of them. Like they'll let you, like through like the device above it, like you can do this, and you can rotate the cylinder so you can read the whole thing. It's pretty cool, actually. Austin was fascinated with that. He messed with that a lot. I think the magnifying glass and a different language and stuff like that had him kind of looking in on those things. But all right, so I mention that just because as these kingdoms are rising and falling, there is a sense of we're the greatest ever. And fortunately in America, we never say anything like the most important democracy in the world, or the most important leader of the free world. Fortunately, we never say anything like that about our country now. We've learned from these biblical examples to not get that arrogant about things and not claim to be the leader of the free world or the greatest empire ever. Fortunately, we've learned from such arrogance that it results in a massive downfall. Okay, anyway, but all of these had news clippings like our own in their own day. And so what we find, it reminded me of this writing by Malcolm Muggeridge. Y'all know who Malcolm Muggeridge was? He was a journalist. He wrote Chronicles of a Wasted Life, Volume 1 and 2. It was such a wasted life, he wrote 2 volumes. But anyway, he was working as a journalist, and he wrote this. Actually, it's not a writing, someone wrote it. It's a speech he gave called The End of Christendom, but Not of Christ. And his testimony of coming to salvation is really striking too. It happened in India, of all things, kind of prompted this, an experience he had in India. But anyway, so he is writing with these observations. We look back on history and what do we see? Empires rising and empires falling. Revolutions and counter-revolutions. Wealth accumulating and wealth dispersed. Shakespeare speaks of the rise and fall of the great ones that ebb and flow with the moon. In one lifetime, I've seen my fellow countrymen ruling over a quarter of the world. The great majority of them convinced that God who made the mighty would make them mightier yet. I've heard a crazed crack Austrian, that's Hitler, by the way, proclaim to the world the establishment of a German Reich that would last for 1,000 years. An Italian clown, I think this is a reference to Mussolini, who announced that he would restart the calendar with his own assumption to power. A murderous Georgian in the Kremlin, that's Stalin, by the way, acclaimed by the intellectual elite as wiser than Solomon and more enlightened than Ashoka. All in one lifetime, all gone with the wind. England, now simply part of an island off the coast of Europe and threatened with dismemberment and even bankruptcy. Hitler and Mussolini dead and remembered only in infamy. Stalin, a forbidden name in the regime he once dominated for 3 decades. All in one lifetime, all gone like the wind. Against the backdrop of fallen regimes and behind the debris of these civilizations stands the gigantic figure of Jesus Christ, because of whom, in whom, and through whom all history will find the answer for its very being. So Malcolm Muggeridge, The End of Christendom, but Not of Christ. I highly recommend it. Hard to get your hands on it. They published a book, but it was limited, and I've only seen it in printed copy at the Southwestern Seminary Library. I've not been able to buy one because I was going to buy a copy of it, but I can't get my hands on it. So, all right, couldn't then. I need to look again. But Malcolm Muggeridge, it's only about 40 pages long, too. It's a speech he did. It's maybe 40 or 50 pages long. But anyway, so I thought of that writing when I think about Isaiah 13 through 39, because you have this rise and fall of kingdoms, and the kings involved: Tiglath-Pileser, Nebuchadnezzar, Darius, Cyrus the Great, who at his burial made sure he was buried in a location that had a 4-foot tall entrance. You know why? So that everyone who came to visit him would have to bow in order to get in. Yeah. All right, so Isaiah 13 through 39, one of the central themes here is the trustworthiness of God. So the fate of Jerusalem, Judah, and all of Israel is in his hands. He's sovereign, and he's moving these these nations, he's moving them around. And trusting in nations or kings is foolishness, because he's causing them to rise and fall. He's bringing them into power and bringing them out of power. And that would be good reminder for us as well today, if all the machinations going on around the world today of nations and nation building and nation destroying and all these kinds of things going on, is that a realization that God is sovereign. I'm not to say that God endorses the explicit evil of these regimes, but to say that he does use them and sovereignly directs them. And I think that's a good reminder for us. These chapters follow naturally upon the vision of Emmanuel, the ruler of all the kingdoms. Because the contrast here is against this promised coming Messiah, a righteous, everlasting kingdom. And he comes out of that and says, now let's talk about the existing kingdoms today. Babylon, Egypt, Assyria, Medo-Persia, right? Let's talk about all these kingdoms. So it comes out of this language about the coming Messianic king and his eternal dominance and his righteous reign. And he goes, all right, but now he cycles back and says, okay, well, if that's true, what about the current kingdoms? And God's going to say to Isaiah, well, let me tell you what's going to happen to them. You know, Babylon, who's really, really powerful, yeah, they're going to be completely annihilated. You know, the Medo-Persians, them too. Tyre and Sidon, those guys? Yeah, them also. And so he's going to work through this and show how God's judgment is going to come on all of them. That we'll see again momentarily. Babylon will be used by God to bring judgment on Judah. That's really clear. Nebuchadnezzar is God's guy to bring about judgment. God will judge Babylon, though, through the Medes. and Babylon will be completely abandoned in the future. All right, so before we read the text, I did want to show you. So there's some artist renditions of Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. It's one of the ancient wonders of the world, the Hanging Gardens. And there's the river, Tigris, runs right through the downtown Babylon and get you a water taxi like downtown Paris. I've done the water taxi in downtown Paris. Yeah, get you a water taxi. They're kind of expensive, but it's better than walking, I will tell you that. And since I don't speak French, I feel a little safer doing that than just randomly getting in a taxi and going, I don't speak French. So, but, you know, they have the water taxis going there. Here's another picture of this massive city. We don't know for sure exactly what it looked like, but a lot of the remains are still there. And so these hanging gardens that he built. Here is a picture of more modern. It is abandoned. Do you know who tried to rebuild this thing? Saddam Hussein. He thought he'd relaunch this thing, and it just didn't work out. The river's relocated now, so it's just a desert. And it turns out building huge facilities and houses and things like that is hard if you have zero water. Did you know that? Turns out that if you don't have water, it's really hard to have a city. So yeah, it's dry now. Here's another picture of it. There's some people living around it, and there's excavations going on, and there was an attempt beyond archaeology to try to reestablish it. Like I said, Saddam Hussein had this dream, but it's just never worked out. So here's some pictures within. Again, a lot of this is archaeological stuff. Some of this is actual residents, but there's a limited number of people staying there, mostly archaeological. But yeah, so this statement that Babylon will be completely abandoned in the future has turned out to be true. There's nothing there. The Medes take over, and then after the Medo-Persian Empire falls, you know who dies here, by the way? Not just Nebuchadnezzar or Evel Merodach, who also known in the Bible as Belshazzar, or Belteshazzar. No, Belshazzar. Belteshazzar's Daniel. Belshazzar. That's Nebuchadnezzar's kid. But you know who else dies here from history? Alexander the Great dies in Babylon. Yeah, the age of 33 or 30 or something like that. I think it's 33. Anyway, he dies at a young age of what is a big debate. So there's a lot of question marks there. But what's that? He was Macedonian. So he came from Greece. They never made it back home. He fought a war for 12 years, and finally people got sick of it. They're at the Indus River. Sound familiar? Indus River, India. They went all the way to India, the Indus River, and they got sick of it. His soldiers did, and went, we want to go home for Christmas, which is weird because Jesus hadn't been born yet. But they're like, we're just sure there's something like Christmas somewhere, and we want to go home for it. And so they kidnapped Alexander the Great. And on their way back, they stop off in Babylon, and he died. So a lot of speculation on his death, drank himself to death. I don't think anyone killed him. I think it was self-inflicted probably, but a lot of speculation on what caused his death. But you saw from the photos, there was no local, really high-end emergency room to help him. So no IV fluids, no antibiotics. He was out of luck on that. Is not dominant. They've been fighting with the Assyrians, and they keep getting dominated by the Assyrians, and the Assyrians had turned them into a vassal state the same way that Israel and Judah and Syria had been turned into a vassal state of the Assyrians. At times, Assyria would lose control of Babylon, and then they would regain it. But during this time period, Assyria has defeated Babylon. mighty warriors, that God is going to use this nation that at this point is a vassal state of the Assyrians, is going to come and be involved in the destruction of Jerusalem and the promised land. So there's a warning here. And then he finishes the chapter by saying, and then I'm going to bring an end to them through the Medes, which is really specific prophecy if Isaiah wrote this during the time of King Jotham, Uzziah, Hezekiah, and so forth, Ahaz and Hezekiah, right? So Uzziah, this would have been written 100 years in advance of Babylon's destruction of Jerusalem and 150 years in advance of the Medes' destruction of Babylon. So if this is prophetic material, which I think it is, this is a prediction of the coming events that will take place after Isaiah is long gone. So this is a very prophetic, looking forward into the future part of Isaiah, where he really looks at these nations and gives us future insight into what they will be doing. All right? Questions, comments about that? Yes, when?
I have a question about Babylon. Maybe you're going to cover it later, you don't have to answer. But when we read about Babylon, question, should we think world, is it Babylon the place where the tower was built, all the tribes of the world out?
Do what now? You think of Babylon and what? The Tower of Babylon. Okay, so that's a different, it's in that area, but that's a different Babylonian kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar relaunches it, or his dad, Nebuchadnezzar, and his dad, actually. There's a couple of generations. There's a group of people, and they relaunch this Babylonian idea that is from their region. It would be like, I don't know if a good comparison. They grab hold of the old kingdom, and it'd be like a British king coming to power and retaking the throne in a way that was Queen Victoria-ish, saying, we're back to dominating the world, darn it. And it would be like that. And it's a different generation, different group, but Nebuchadnezzar and his dad and his grandfather, they grab hold of the old Babylonian Empire, and they rebuild on the regional idea of the original Babylon from 2000 BC.
Think the whole world, when you hear Babylon, think all the tribes that were scattered.
Right. The Chaldeans, Abraham leaves the Chaldeans, Ur of the Chaldees. That would have been that original Babylonian group, is the Sumerians and the Chaldeans, and the original Babylonians from that region. Babylon more a region than an ethnicity. They get scattered. I think the scattering in Genesis is supposed to also imply why Abraham's dad might have decided to eventually move. Is that right after the scattering, Abraham's dad, Terah, takes the kids and moves to Padan Aram. And I get the impression that the Tower of Babel, there may have been an early mass exodus and confusion of